The kettle whistled softly as I reached for the mugs. The morning light hadn't yet touched the window panes, but my body didn't need the sun to know it was 5:30 a.m. After 40 years of early starts, I still woke before the birds. The house was quiet, just the way I liked it. I moved through the kitchen like muscle memory, 2 scoops of coffee, a splash of oat milk, the ceramic click of the spoon against the cup. I didn't hear Naomi's little feet. She was always light on them, more whisper than child when she walked. When I turned, she was already sitting on the edge of the kitchen stool, her legs swinging gently still in her dinosaur pajamas. "Grandma," she said, her voice a secret. "Mommy and Daddy said they're taking your money tonight." My hand stilled mid-stir. The air in the kitchen shifted heavier somehow. I smiled. The kind of smile adults put on when they don't want a child to know they're scared. "That's a silly thing to say, sweetheart." "What do you mean?" She shrugged and reached for a cracker from the jar. "I don't know. I was supposed to be asleep. They were talking downstairs. Daddy said you didn't need it all. Mommy said she'd help you." I crouched beside her and brushed a curl from her face. "You didn't dream this." "Nope." I was hiding under the blanket, but I could hear them. She went back to crunching like nothing was wrong. I stood slowly, gripping the edge of the counter just long enough to steady myself. My heart was beating too hard for someone who hadn't moved more than 10 steps. Naomi finished her snack and ran off toward the living room, humming to herself. I poured the coffee, though I no longer wanted it. The bitterness rising in my throat had nothing to do with the roast. By the time Celeste walked in, heels already on phone, already in hand, I'd packed away my fear. Celeste breezed through the kitchen like it belonged to her, dropping her dry cleaning receipt on the counter without a word, and opening the fridge with one hand while tapping a message with the other. I passed her the travel mug I'd already prepared. She took it without looking. "Can you pick up Naomi from school today?" she asked, finally glancing up. "Vincent has a client dinner, and I'm showing 2 properties." I nodded the same way I had for years. "Of course." She smiled briefly, tight and distracted. "You're the best," she said, and then she was gone. The front door closing with that careful click she always used when she was running late. I leaned against the sink and looked out the window. The garden still held the shape Robert had given it. The raised beds, the stone border. He dug every inch by hand the year after he retired, back when we believed we'd have 20 more springs. Instead, we got 2. After he passed, everything shifted, not overnight but in slow, quiet increments. I had 3 children, all grieving in their own way, and none of them prepared. I sold the cabin, paid off Vincent's credit cards when Celeste asked. She didn't like to say debt, just tight months. I let Dedra move into the apartment over the garage and never asked for rent. It was only temporary, she said. That was 6 years ago. When Celeste wanted to start her real estate business, she needed help with a down payment. I wrote a check that day, no questions. Robert would have said yes, and that was enough for me. I paid for Naomi's preschool, then kindergarten, then music classes. Each time it felt right, like mothering, just longer. But somewhere along the line, they stopped saying thank you. Then they stopped asking. Now it was assumed that I'd cover the groceries if the account ran low, that I'd keep the house just in case someone needed to move back, that I'd be here, always here, just off to the side. I rinsed the mugs in the sink, still warm from the coffee, and wiped down the counters. In the distance, I heard Naomi giggle from the living room. Closer, I heard the low murmur of voices behind a half-closed door. I didn't mean to linger in the hallway. Not exactly. I was on my way to put fresh towels in the upstairs bathroom when I caught the edge of Vincent's voice, low and clipped from behind the barely ajar guest room door. "She's not getting any younger," he said. "If we don't step in now, she might waste everything." Celeste responded, her tone softer, but no less pointed. "We are not stealing from her. We're protecting her. She doesn't need that much money sitting around. It's not safe." There was a pause, the kind that carries weight, and then Vincent added, "And we could actually put it to use. That house is just sitting there, like a vault." I stood perfectly still, the towel bundle pressed tight against my chest. My heart thudded once hard and slow, like it was deciding whether to break or steel itself. "Once she signs over access, it'll make everything easier," Celeste said. She probably won't even notice, especially if we keep it framed as support, Vincent replied. The towel slipped a little in my arms, but I didn't move. I waited until their voices softened into indistinct murmurs. Then back down the hallway, my footsteps careful practiced. I returned to the kitchen, folded the towels neatly on a chair, and started wiping down the stovetop, though it was already clean. My hands moved out of habit, but my thoughts were elsewhere, drawing invisible lines between yesterday's whisper from Naomi and what I just heard with my own ears. They weren't planning to ask me, they were planning around me. I didn't cry, I didn't feel rage either. Not yet. What I felt was something sharper, steadier, an alertness that hadn't stirred in years. The same quiet instinct that once told me when a fever was rising in a child before the thermometer confirmed it. Something was coming. That night I called Margot. Margot didn't say hello when she picked up. She never does. Just what's wrong, like she could already hear the shift in my breathing. I told her everything. Naomi's whisper, the conversation behind the door, the way Celeste barely looked at me anymore, like I'd become another one of the fixtures in the house. Useful, dependable, but not worth consulting. When I finished, there was a short silence on her end. Then her voice came through calm and dry as ever. They're not protecting you, Iris. They're circling you. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came because part of me had already known that. Part of me had known it even before Naomi spoke. Check your accounts, she said. Everything, bank investments, your will, anything you once gave them access to, even casually take it back. I don't think they've taken anything. Yet they will, and they'll convince themselves they're doing it for your own good. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone warm against my ear. It's just so calculated. Margot snorted. It's survival. They see your savings, your home, your routine, and they're thinking long term. You're a safety net, Iris. But safety nets don't get consulted. They get leaned on. I swallowed hard. Celeste said something about helping manage things, just until I didn't want to anymore. She'll say it's temporary. Vincent will call it peace of mind, but once your name is off the documents, you'll never get it back. I didn't want to believe it, but I trusted Margot more than I trusted my own optimism. You need to act before they do, she said. Get your lawyer, quietly, don't announce a thing. I looked across the room at Robert's old writing desk, where I still kept the original copy of our will, the one we'd drafted before he passed. Start there, she said, as if she'd seen where my eyes landed. Then look at the rest. They're counting on you being too polite to stop them. The line went quiet for a moment, just long enough for me to hear the distant ticking of the wall clock downstairs. The next morning, I asked Dedra if she had a minute. Deidre was folding laundry in the garage apartment when I came by. The space was warm and quiet, smelling faintly of detergent and lemon oil, the way she liked it. She looked up when I entered, then down again, her fingers fumbling with a towel that didn't need that much smoothing. I need to ask you something, I said. She nodded too quickly. Okay. Do you know what Celeste and Vincent are planning? She paused just long enough to answer me without words. The kind of pause where the truth stands just behind the teeth, waiting for permission. I stepped closer. Deidre. Her mouth tightened. They said you might need help. That you've been forgetting things? I haven't. I know. She whispered, eyes still fixed on the towel. But they think. Or maybe they just want to believe. I waited. They're talking about a family meeting, she said. Finally. Soon. Maybe this weekend. They want it to seem casual, but she swallowed. They're going to ask you to sign some things. Just a power of attorney, they said. Just in case. I sat down beside her on the edge of the bed, careful not to touch the neatly folded shirts. Did you agree to it? I didn't say yes, she said, but I didn't say no either. I watched her for a moment. Her hair was pulled back the same way it always had been since college, neat, unassuming. She looked like a woman who had trained herself to take up less space. I knew the habit well. I don't want to lose them, she murmured. If I speak up, if I take your side, they'll freeze me out. I'm not asking you to take sides, I said gently. I'm asking you to see clearly. Deidre looked up, then finally meeting my eyes, and in that flicker of contact I saw it. Fear, yes, but something stronger just beneath it. A line that hadn't yet been crossed. I'll be there, she said, voice small but firm. When it happens, I nodded, feeling something settle inside me. We sat together for a few more minutes, not saying much. That night, Naomi came to me again. This time, her voice was even quieter. Naomi crawled into bed with me just after 9, clutching her favorite blanket and looking unusually serious. She didn't ask to watch cartoons or request a snack. She just climbed under the covers and curled up beside me like she used to when she was smaller, back when she called me Gamma, and believed the moon followed us home. I put my arm around her shoulders, couldn't sleep. She shook her head against my side. Mommy and Daddy were talking again. My chest tightened. I waited. "They think you're not thinking right," she whispered. "Daddy said if you don't sign the papers, he'll tell your doctor your brain is broken." The words settled into the room like dust impossible to sweep away. I felt my hands go cold. I didn't move. Naomi kept talking, her voice a hush in the dark. "He said doctors believe stuff like that when grown-ups say it." I closed my eyes, but it didn't help. My thoughts were loud now, clattering through every memory of recent weeks. Every strange look, every time Celeste had said, "Are you sure you didn't forget you were?" or laughed too easily when I hesitated mid-sentence. Naomi rolled to face me. "I don't think your brain is broken." "I don't either," I said softly, brushing the hair from her forehead. She looked up at me, her eyes too wise for 6. "Are they going to make you leave, no sweetheart?" My voice held steady, but my pulse didn't. "They can't make me do anything I don't want to." Naomi tucked her head under my arm again. I stared at the ceiling, my fingers gently stroking her back. But I wasn't there in the room anymore. I was inside a future I hadn't dared imagine before. A future where my own children might try to take my name off everything I had built while convincing themselves it was love. They weren't just planning to control me. They were preparing to erase me quietly, legally, with forms and witnesses and signatures. I didn't sleep that night. Naomi, her breath even and warm beside me, but I lay awake until the sky turned pale. I kept hearing Robert's voice from a conversation we'd had the month before his heart gave out. "Promise me, Iris, if it ever comes down to choosing between being nice and being safe, choose safe." That morning, I called Margot again. This time, I didn't hesitate. Celeste texted me on Thursday morning. "Family dinner Saturday. Just the 5 of us. Don't worry about cooking. We've got it covered." She added a smiley face, which somehow made it worse. By Saturday evening, the dining table had been set with Care-Loth napkins, real glasses, candles flickering low like it was a celebration. Vincent brought in takeout from that overpriced bistro downtown and announced it like he'd cooked it himself. Dedra sat stiffly at the far end of the table, barely touching her food. Naomi was at her friend's house, conveniently out of the way. We made it through salad before Celeste put her fork down with exaggerated gentleness. "Mom, there's something we've been meaning to talk to you about." I nodded, my face blank. "It's just, well, we've noticed lately that things seem a little overwhelming for you. The house, the bills, everything," Vincent chimed in. "We've been thinking maybe it's time to let us help more, just to ease some pressure." Celeste reached into her tote and pulled out a manila folder. I saw it coming before it landed on the table. "These are just some simple documents," she said lightly. "Power of attorney stuff. Nothing changes unless you want it to. It's just in case, really." I picked up the papers, turned a few pages, and let my eyes move across the words without reading them. I let my hands shake just slightly as I set them down. Celeste softened her voice. "There's no pressure, Mom. We just care about you. We want to make sure you're protected." I nodded again and looked at the folder as if it were heavier than it was. I murmured something about needing time, something vague and safe. My phone angled slightly between the candle and the breadbasket recorded every word. Deidre wouldn't meet my eyes. I didn't blame her. Vincent refilled my water glass like I was already halfway to helpless. Celeste squeezed my hand as though she'd just handed me piece paperwork, meant to erase my autonomy. After dinner, I thanked them politely and promised to think it over. I even smiled. Then I walked straight upstairs and locked the door. By morning, I had an appointment with a lawyer. By noon the next day, I was sitting across from a woman named Marissa Chen at the law office Margaret had recommended. She greeted me with a firm handshake and didn't once speak to me like I was fragile. That alone made me trust her. I gave her everything. The recording, the text message from Celeste, a list of accounts, my current will. She listened without interruption, taking notes in a clean spiral-bound notebook. When I was done, she leaned back and said, "You're not paranoid. You're prudent." We rewrote my will that afternoon. Nothing dramatic. I'd already divided things equally among my children, but now we added clauses, clear language, protecting my independence instructions, should anyone attempt to contest my capacity. I revoked an old medical proxy Celeste had once pushed me to sign. Instead, I named Dedra as co-decision maker with stipulations. If she declined, control would pass to my attorney, not another family member. When I told Marissa I'd chosen Dedra, she raised an eyebrow. She hesitated, I said, but she didn't lie. That's worth something. Next, I called the bank. I changed passwords, updated alert settings, added two-factor verification to every account. I removed Celeste from an old shared access line she hadn't touched in years, but I hadn't forgotten it was there. I closed the savings account Robert and I once used for emergencies. I opened a new one under my name alone. When I got home, Margot was waiting with her usual iced tea, and that look she gets when she wants to say, "I told you so," but knows better. Instead, she pulled out a folder and laid it flat on the kitchen table. "I printed transcripts from your phone recording," she said. In triplicate, we worked until dusk, labeling, cataloging, placing copies into separate envelopes. I tucked one into the back of the spice rack, another into my desk drawer. A third went into the safe. Before I went to bed, I stood in the doorway of Naomi's room and watched her sleep. One hand curled beneath her cheek. The house was silent, but something in the air had shifted. The next time they came, I'd be ready. The petition came 2 weeks later. Celeste had filed for legal guardianship, citing concerns about my memory, my judgment, and my increased dependence on others. She attached a letter signed by Vincent, vague and self-serving, and a list of so-called incidents, none of which had ever happened. I didn't cry when I read it. I didn't even feel angry. What I felt was clarity. Marissa moved quickly. We gathered everything. My updated medical evaluation, notarized bank records, the recording from the dinner. Even a letter from Naomi's teacher confirming I'd picked her up on time every time. We had dates, details, and enough documentation to sink their case before it reached the judge's bench. Deidre sat beside me in the courtroom, shoulders tight but steady. When they called her to testify, her voice shook only once. She asked for help. I didn't give it, but I will now. Celeste didn't meet my eyes. She kept her attention fixed on the table, her hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles looked bloodless. Vincent stayed close but quiet, letting her take the lead, just like always. When it was my turn, I stood straight. I told the truth plainly. I said nothing to humiliate them, just enough to show the court I knew what was mine and who I was. The judge didn't deliberate long. He denied the petition in full. I watched Celeste's face drain as the ruling was read. Her eyes didn't fill with tears. They filled with something worse, realization. The fight they started was over, but the fracture they created would not fade so quickly. Later that evening, I sat in the garden alone, watching the light fall across the tomato vines, and began to wonder what it would mean to start over. The house sold faster than I expected. It had good bones, the agent said. I smiled at that. I'd spent decades holding those bones together, even after Robert was gone. I packed quietly, sorting through a lifetime in pieces. His cufflinks, Naomi's finger paintings, the old tea tins that still smelled faintly of cinnamon. I moved into a small cottage on the edge of a senior community just outside town. Clean, simple light pouring in through every window. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. No one dropped off dry cleaning here. No one assumed I'd pick up dinner or remember appointments they never told me about. I planted tomatoes in the narrow garden bed, out back. Robert would have teased me about the spacing, said I never gave anything room to breathe, but they came up anyway, slow and stubborn like me. Naomi visits every weekend. She brings drawing stories from school and always insists on checking the plants. She calls the garden hours. I let her. Deidre comes by sometimes too. She doesn't say much about what happened. Neither do I, but she brings coffee, sits across from me with quiet eyes, and that's enough. Celeste hasn't called. Neither has Vincent. I'm not waiting. I take long walks most mornings. Drink my tea without rush, read books without interruption. Some days I don't speak to anyone but the birds and the woman at the front gate. Those are good days too. I don't feel invisible anymore. I don't feel small. I feel like myself, someone I hadn't realized I'd stopped being until I remembered what it felt like to be seen. And when Naomi wraps her arms around me and says, "You're my favorite person," I believe her because I know now I'm worth being chosen.